What if the moment of death could be predicted? Imagine that in one day, each person receives an exact, unchangeable date for their departure. In the first hours, the world plunges into panic. People don't understand how this is even possible. After all, we don't only die of old age. People are hit by cars, they die in wars, they fall down stairs, they die in fires, from someone else's mistake or their own stupidity. How can you know the date of death in advance if half of all deaths are accidents? This is precisely the key question. Scientists are quickly coming to a frightening conclusion. Human biology has never been the only factor in death. Yes, the body ages. Yes, cells have a limit to how many times they can divide. Yes, DNA accumulates damage. But all this is just background. The real discovery lies elsewhere. Every person dies at a point where biological vulnerability coincides with an external event. An accident doesn't kill everyone equally. A fire doesn't either. War doesn't take random people. There's always a moment when the body is about to break down and the world strikes. And here comes something that science can't fully explain. A strange pattern is revealed in the data. The date of death doesn't shift, even if a person changes lifestyle, country, profession, or environment. It's as if there's an external scenario that adjusts events to a person's biological state. If there's no accident, there will be illness. If there's no illness, there will be conflict. If there's no conflict, there will be an accident. Events are different. The outcome is the same. Scientists cautiously call this the principle of inevitable coincidence. Philosophers call it fate. Religions call it what they've always talked about. Not a mechanism. It's not a device, but a certain force that doesn't kill directly, but rather arranges the world so that death occurs at the right time.
The economy collapses first. Banks understand, if death is inevitable, then loans are a sham. Employers look at dates and make cynical decisions. Insurance loses its meaning. But the worst begins in everyday life. People stop believing in coincidence. Any accident is now perceived as destined, any tragedy as planned. And this changes psychology. Those who have little time to live stop fearing risk. Those with decades ahead begin to avoid everything: roads, people, conflicts. But events still find their people. When the first major war begins after the introduction of dates, a terrible discovery occurs. Almost exclusively, those whose dates coincided with this period die. Not because they are bad soldiers, because war simply became their way of leaving. And then humanity understands. The almighty force doesn't choose how you die, it chooses when, and the world does the rest. Over time, panic subsides. People stop asking, why this? A new question arises. If death will come anyway on its appointed day, does it make sense to fear life? And the answer turns out to be unexpected. In a world where even chance is not random, where accidents, wars, and mistakes are merely tools, the only thing that truly belongs to a person is how they live until that date. You don't know what you'll die of, and that no longer matters. You know when. And everything between now and that date is still your choice. And perhaps that's precisely why, in a world where death is predetermined, life for the first time becomes truly valuable. But over time, another, far more disturbing thought emerges. If the date of death is immutable, does that mean any attempt to avoid it is pointless? This question is becoming central to science. Researchers are beginning to study people who consciously take risks, jumping from heights, extreme professions, dangerous areas. And something strange is revealed. People with a distant death date escape situations where, statistically, they should have died. And those whose date is close die in the most mundane circumstances. Not in a disaster, not in a war, but in a bathroom, in the kitchen, on an empty road, as if the world itself chooses the moment when to intervene. Philosophers call this the most powerful blow to the idea of free will in human history. If the outcome is always the same, how free is your path? But biologists answer differently. Yes, the date is immutable, but the path to it is not. You can live your life in fear, cowering before every risk. Or you can live it in movement, mistakes, love, and action. The date will be the same, but life will be different. And this is where a turning point in society's consciousness occurs.
The cult of longevity is disappearing. Previously, living as long as possible was valued. Now it's living as deeply as possible. People are starting to choose professions differently. They're giving up hateful jobs. They're no longer tolerating destructive relationships. A new ethic is emerging. Don't put off the important until later, because later is no longer an abstraction. It has a number. It's interesting that depression levels first rise sharply and then fall just as sharply, because the uncertain fear of the future disappears. What remains is a specific time frame. Religions are experiencing a revival, but not because they received proof they were right. Because for the first time, humanity was confronted with something that science cannot refute and cannot explain. This force does not punish. It does not reward. It does not directly intervene. It simply knows. And it gives the world enough chaos for everything to happen on its own. Disasters do not happen to everyone. Wars do not take random people. Accidents are not uniform. As if the world were a field of possibilities, and death was the point at which all these possibilities converge. One day, a group of scientists decides to take a radical step. They isolate people with the same date of death in a completely controlled environment. No dangers, no conflicts, no external threats. And still, someone falls. Someone makes a mistake. Someone suddenly falls ill. The system finds a way. This becomes the final proof. Death is not tied to an event. The event adapts to death. Over time, people stop asking, "How will I die?" because it no longer makes sense. They begin to ask, "Who was I before this moment?" And this is where the paradox arises. In a world where death is predetermined, people begin to live more courageously than ever, because the fear of losing life disappears, but the fear of wasting it remains. Perhaps the date of death is not a death sentence, but the only honest limitation we've ever had. You cannot transcend time, but within it, you are free. You can fear chance, or you can understand. They are not enemies, but part of the system. And when on the last day you wake up, not knowing whether it will be an accident, an illness, or just silence, you will understand the most important thing. Death always knew when to come, but life never knew how exactly you would live it. And that is precisely what it left you. The main question is, what will happen after death? And then an even stranger question appears. If the date was always fixed, was your beginning fixed too? Scientists start searching backward, mapping lives from the endpoint to the origin. Patterns emerge again. Key meetings, narrow escapes, random decisions that weren't so random. As if life was not a straight road, but a corridor gently narrowing toward a single door. Not forcing your steps, only limiting the exits. Which means something unsettling and liberating at once. You were never free in time, only in direction. And that direction was everything. Subscribe if you like this video and give me your thoughts in the comments.